Now we can focus a bit on the front end, which we haven't looked at yet. So the front end really just consists of a form. If we look at the front end, we have some state, which is going to be the logged in user. And if there's not a logged in user, we'll just have an empty object here. And here we actually are just looking, hey, look, if there's no ID on the user, we're going to show the form. If there's an ID on the user, we're going to show that user's name, and we'll also present a logout button as well. What we're going to do now, right now, if we ended up clicking on the button, we would end up seeing the credentials. So let's start by setting this up, and this is the second part first because we can't get the token until we end up logging in, but we're going to end up generating a token if the user ends up logging in correctly. So what we could end up doing here is we could end up making this asynchronous, and what we can end up doing is we could end up setting our auth, and let's be optimistic here, and we'll say we're going to end up, actually, this is incorrect. It's a two-part thing. First thing I need to do is to end up generating the token. So what I'm going to end up doing here is that I'm going to make an Axios call, and this is going to be a post to /API auth, and I'm going to end up sending in these credentials. Okay, and here actually, let's probably makes a little bit more sense. We could use async, but we could also put a then here. This will end up giving us a token, and let's just start by logging the token so we could see it. Catch, we're going to get an error. We'll want to display it, but we'll end up, for now, just console logging it. And so if I rerun this again and I click on this, I'll see that I've got this status code of 500. We'll work on that. That really should end up being a 401. But let's try this. And that was Lucy in uppercase. And here I actually have a response, and I've got the token. So actually, don't get back the token directly. This is going to be a response. And what I'm interested in is the response .data.token. So if I try this again, one more time, probably took a second to build. Now I could end up seeing this token. And now what I could end up doing with this token is I could end up setting it in local storage. I'm going to put this on 2 lines because I'm going to want to have a little bit of reusability here. And so I want to set this token so that the client could end up using it. So I'm going to say window, local storage, and I'm going to set an item. This is going to be my token, and I'm going to end up setting it. And after I end up setting this, what I'm going to attempt to do here is that I'm going to, here we could end up, let's see, we'll go over here and we'll say, I can even call it the same method we called it on the server, find user from token. This method doesn't end up existing yet. We could put it here. My token is going to be, and I'll show you why I'm not passing it into this method right now. We're going to say window, local storage, get item, token. And for now, let's just console log it so we can see it. So we'll run this one more time, and we should see the same token over here that we're logging out here. Let's try that one more time. Make sure this works. Okay, so we have the token, and what we could end up doing here is we could be a little bit optimistic here, and we could say, well, could make this set this up so that we are making an Axios call, and we're going to make a GET request. This is going to be to our API auth. Now here, we want to end up sending this token, but we want to send it in the header. And we can end up doing this with Axios. So we could say, and you could set more than one header here. Headers are the headers are set up as an object with keys and values, and this is going to be our authentication token, and we're going to end up using our token. So here we can end up getting back a response, and we can end up setting our auth to be the response.data. Again, we could be somewhat optimistic about it. We could put a catch here, and just for the moment, again, let's think of happy paths at the moment. So now we can put in Lucy's credentials, and we've got a different error here. We're seeing logout is not defined. That's true because we actually were able to log in, but there is no logout method. So the logout method, relatively simple here. For logging out, we could just end up, for now, let's just keep it empty for the moment. And we'll go over here and we'll put in Mo. Now we'll see logout. Nothing's really happening. For logout, we could set the auth to an empty object. Let's refresh this again. Notice that we're not staying logged in. We're going to fix that in a minute. So we could either do Mo or Lucy. We could log out as Mo. Again, one of the things we want to do when the user is logged in, we want to keep them logged in. And that's where what we can end up doing here, and this is why I separated these two things out, is that we could end up using a use effect. And we could say when your app starts, let's see, was the user logged in? Is there a token that ends up existing here? And we could say, hey, look, find user from token. Right? We could end up just calling this method here. It'll see if it could end up logging the user in. What's interesting is that we do have a logged in user. One thing that we want to do here is we actually want to log the user out. So when we do log out the user, let's also make sure we remove the item, which is going to be the token. So now we can log Mo out. Mo's logged out. We can end up logging Mo in. And if we do a hard reload, we'll see that Mo is still going to end up being logged in here. One other thing that probably makes sense to do is that if a user is logged out, there's no reason for us to try to make this call here. So it probably makes sense that if we end up trying to find the user with a token, if we can't find the token, there really is nothing else to do, and we're really done with it at that point. So here it doesn't even bother looking for a user. We could log in as Lucy. And so now we've sort of completed the loop. There still is some additional work we could end up doing, maybe setting some error messages, which we could end up displaying here if the credentials aren't good. So, we could go over here and say, hey, look, you attempted to log in. Maybe what we want to do, if there's an error, we could end up setting the error. So we log out, we attempt to log in, we'll see bad credentials when we end up doing this. And some other things just to tighten things up a little bit. You notice if we log out, Lucy's information is still here. So one thing we might want to do is that when a user ends up logging out, we might want to set the error back to an empty string, set the user name to an empty string, set the password to an empty string, so that a user can end up logging in And let's just make sure that that was done correctly here. We've got our set username and set password. And I think that this just was a delayed build here, but let's just double check that. So now we can log out, and this is cleared out as well, and we could log in as Lucy. And again, this is basically just authenticating, but you could imagine that one of the other things that you might do, if a user was logged in successfully and you ended up finding a user from a token, maybe there's additional Axios calls that you want to end up making to other routes to get additional information about that user.